With yet another movie crossing the $250 million production mark, it looks like the Dullness of Destiny is going to struggle to break even at the box office. We must be at the tipping point for studios willing to throw so much money at a mediocre movie. It just can't be sustainable. Let's get the somewhat good out of the way first. Dial of Destiny begins with a flurry of spectacular action scenes, involving a brawl on top of a moving train, except for the wide shot of Indy jumping between the two train carriages. The physics has as much weight as a donut in space. There's also a fun set piece in which Indy desperately dashes on horseback through New York City subway tunnels. A tuk-tuk chase through Tangier's tortuous streets are some parts enthralling and some parts CGI hell, especially as Helena and Indy leap and grapple with one another. Unreal visual effects take control as the scope and intensity of these events escalate. The decisive dogfight in digital sludge with nothing visually pleasing. I did say the good was in short supply. The turn of Dial of Destiny is set by the robotic replica of a well-known icon, which was unfortunately come to represent Disney at this point. Its opening action sequence features skillful maneuvering on board moving vehicles to evade goose-stepping, treasure-hunting opponents, much like a typical Indiana Jones adventure might. The visual accuracy and rhythm that Steven Spielberg and series editor Michael Kahn provided to each of the previous 4 films, on the other hand, are noticeably lacking from the action as directed and co-written by James Mangold. Dial of Destiny is a horrible duplicate of what came before it, rather than familiar visuals conveying in cinematic language. To be sure, as with Star Wars, one could argue that this hypothetical realm transcends a single group of storytellers. Don't get me wrong, Mangold is a great director who can handle box office successes. Ford vs Ferrari, Walk the Line, Copland, and even breathe new life into the faltering X-Men franchise with Logan. The Dial of Destiny, on the other hand, feels like a corporate movie at its worst, with lackluster visual aesthetics depriving the movie of identity. Indiana Jones walked perilous corridors by torchlight in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the contrast between the outside world and this gloomy tomb creates awe. However, nearly every scene in the dark here is weakly lit and impossible to distinguish. Like many other recent blockbusters, Dial of Destiny relies on fast cuts to accelerate Indy's confrontations with the Nazis, yet the choreography is barely discernible. This is one of Harrison Ford's favourite characters, and he gives it his all in the role's ostensibly final outing, as seen by the way he choked up at the Cannes premiere when addressing Indiana Jones.
Harrison Ford!
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very touched. I'm very moved by this.
Indiana Jones walks through the high-stakes set pieces with the natural sluggishness, clumsiness of an aged man, yet still delivering a powerful punch. He periodically complains about his crumbling vertebrae. On the other hand, Ford shows loss in the film's more contemplative scenes, softening his generally severe demeanour. Among all the problems with this film, Harrison Ford's dedication is not one of them. The problem is that the film gives him nothing to do. As the film progressed, I became more depressed seeing Ford try to recreate the old days, but he's simply too old at 80 years old to undertake the kind of action required here. This movie is another example of a legacy sequel that sacrifices narrative for regular cameos to milk as much goodwill as possible from the series. A run-in with deep water eels causes a wink-wink remark about how they resemble Snake, and his whip's impotence in the face of gunfire recalls the combat in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mangold's screenplay, co-written with Jez Butterworth, John Henry Butterworth, and David Cobb, uncomfortably sprinkles in nodding nods to Indy's previous outings. And with that many writers, it's very common to create a Frankenstein monster of a script with no real soul, and that is unfortunately what has happened here. After seeing Phoebe Waller-Bridge, known for her Fleabag and Killing Eve, which I both love, I can see why they thought, we want some of those modern feminist smarts that are all the rage, but rather than bend to her will, this bends her to it. Although she has a roguish demeanour at first, her monotonous action girl character ultimately loses its allure. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, her most offensive comments are all put into the trailer. I'm not sure why they thought these lines would get people on our side. Her statement about being brilliant and amusing and blah blah blah.
What do you mean? Resourceful, daring, beautiful, self-sufficient?
And then I stole it.
It's called capitalism.
But the film never shows us these characteristics. We are just informed that she has them. God forbid a modern female character has a true character growth. And there was one sequence in the closing act that made my head shake in pure disappointment. Indy is being kidnapped and shot, so it's up to Helena to save him. Again, God forbid Indy save Helena in his own film. Anyway, there's a wonderful action moment where Helena races along a runway on a motorcycle while the plane carrying Indy prepares to take off. But all I could think during this sequence was, why isn't Indy the one on the bike here? I came to see Indiana Jones, not some character that I've never heard of before. Why are they hogging all the limelight? Can someone in the comments explain why? Oh, and leave a like if that's not too much trouble. Really helps me out. Helena's persona is as unclear as the storyline. She's introduced as a Bond-style adventurer with a roguish bent, and even as a small sidekick, but the film never quite chooses what to do with her. On the one hand, her obsession with the money contrasts sharply with Indy's more sympathetic, it belongs in a museum attitude towards antiquity. On the other hand, owing to her father's past obsession with the doll, she is just as much as part of the plot. Instead of truly fighting or producing personal drama, these contradictory motivations just appear in separate scenes, as if entirely different drafts of the story had been tossed together. She never has to choose between completing her father's life's work and selling an object. Instead, she merely feels strong sentiments in one scenario and strong feelings in another. Nearly every recognizable music cue, emotion, and character type that has come to characterize the Indiana Jones films are paraded in Dial of Destiny. Additionally, as it moves from the United States to Morocco, Greece, and eventually Sicily, the movie finds a variety of settings for the film's numerous drawn-out action situations. Mangold is not Spielberg, so this flurry of protracted chases, weighed down by the weight of too much CGI, is neither as visually dynamic or as emotionally staring at as any in the previous movies. Instead, they are effective and professional, which, although more than can be said for many other Hollywood tentpole action sequences, it isn't enough to explain the narrative bloat that extends the film by more than 30 minutes beyond the others. So what about the final climactic third act? An Indiana Jones film with time travel premise is a pretty ludicrous idea, but I guess it must follow in the footsteps of superhero films and adapt in the alternate timeline, multiverse genre pattern, which nearly always ends in a slew of plot flaws and handy narrative devices. Why can continental drift, for example, influence time travel? What is the relationship between the coordinates in space and coordinates in time? Also, if Archimedes meant for the dial to always bring its users to this time, why would any of those locations matter? Again, it feels like multiple drafts stitched together. Jones has lived a long time and seen many strange things. He witnessed the Holy Grail perform life-saving miracles, the Ark of the Covenant consume a horde of Nazis, a cult leader rip out a man's heart, and aliens return to their home planet. Given that the film began during World War II, most spectators presumably expected Jones to return here. But the Romans? It felt like a dramatic shift to the left. Indy initially chooses to stay in Sicily despite being shot in the chest and in need of a quick contemporary medical assistance, intended to spend the remainder of his days on the picturesque shore next to one of history's greatest brains in Archimedes, even if it means Indy will die. Helena kindly knocks out Jones, sending him back to the end of 1969, preventing a sad sweet conclusion. However, by the end of the movie, it pivots away for a sentimental farewell geared at fan service and acknowledgement, taking away all of Indiana Jones' anatomy for the sake of one more appearance. While obviously forced, it was still one bright spot in the movie, Indy and Marion's reunion. There's also a nice allusion to Raiders of the Lost Ark when the two start acting passionately towards each other and replicate the classic "Where Doesn't It Hurt" kissing scene. This wonderful moment occurs between two people who have been through a lot together. Overall, Salah laminates in Mangold's film.
Miss waking up every morning, wondering what wonderful adventure the new day will bring to us.
To which Jones snackily responds,
Those days have come and gone.
Perhaps, perhaps not.
Even while the producers are likely dependent on viewers who share Salah's nostalgic desire to flock to theatres, the bulk of the underwhelming results will only serve to reinforce their dismal awareness that these days are generally long gone. Dial of Destiny is tedious, it's a lousy imitation of earlier far superior Indiana Jones films. Everything is well crafted for the most part, and there are some fun parts to keep viewers engaged, but definitely not for the 2.5 hour running time. However, it approaches the game with such caution that there aren't many outstanding moments. The movie is ultimately just a heartbreaking reminder of how fortunate we were to have Indy in our movie lives. In the end, Dial of Destiny finally commits the most heinous offence a movie can do. It is neither exceptional nor dreadful and accomplishes nothing while avoiding hazardous perils. It serves no use other than to gratify nostalgia, and it's easily forgotten. It's just dull. Well, that's enough rambling for one day.